Your brain is lying to you, and the worst part? You believe it. That breakup didn't mean you're unlovable. That failure isn't proof you'll never succeed. These aren't facts. They're just stories you're telling yourself. And these stories, they're not harmless. They twist neutral events into personal attacks, turning small setbacks into proof that you're the problem. The event isn't the enemy. It's the meaning you attach to it. So, what if you could see these stories for what they really are? Fiction, not facts. What if you could rewrite them into something lighter, kinder, and more empowering? Because the life you deserve isn't locked behind your pain. It's buried under the stories you keep telling yourself. It's time to change that. Objectivity and subjectivity, the two realities. Every single moment of life splits into two distinct versions of reality. What actually happened and what we tell ourselves happened. One is fact, clear, simple, and free of judgment. The other is fiction, a deeply personal story full of emotion, assumptions, and meaning. Take a breakup, for example. Objectively, it's simple. Two people are no longer in a relationship. But when subjectivity swoops in, suddenly, it's not just a breakup. No, it's a statement on your worth. It's a series of thoughts that tell you you're unlovable, you're unworthy, you can never find happiness. The facts stayed the same, but the story starts dragging you down, whispering lies about who you are and what your future holds. Subjectivity twists neutral events into deeply personal tragedies. It's not just a missed opportunity, it's proof that you're destined to fail. It's not just a tough conversation, it's confirmation that no one will ever truly understand you. These stories don't just appear out of nowhere. They come from our deep need to make sense of things. We crave meaning in chaos, so our brains fill in the blanks. But often the blanks are filled with self-doubt and blame. The problem isn't the event, it's the weight of the narrative we attach to it. When we let subjectivity take the wheel, life feels heavier, darker, and harder than it needs to be. But recognizing this division between fact and story is the first step to freeing yourself from the grip of these false narratives. It's not about silencing the stories entirely. It's about seeing them for what they are, just stories. The need for meaning and control. Humans are hardwired for meaning. When something happens, especially something painful or unexpected, the brain immediately starts stitching together a story to make sense of it. Why? Because uncertainty feels unbearable. Without a clear narrative, the brain panics, searching for patterns and explanations to regain a sense of control. Imagine failing at something important. Objectively, it's just a setback, a moment to learn, regroup, and try again. But your brain doesn't stop there. Instead, it digs through your past, picks up every similar failure, and weaves them into a crushing story of how it's not just a setback, but your lack of capability to operate clearly in life. This tendency to jump to the worst-case scenario isn't random. It's a survival mechanism. Long ago, assuming the worst helped humans stay alive, if you expected danger, you'd be ready for it. But today, that same mechanism has become a pattern that just amplifies the pain further. The more you think about the worst-case scenario, the more you start attaching it to your identity. And you start believing you're the one causing the chaos. Round and round you go. For many, this pattern has become habitual due to past experiences of trauma, neglect, or abuse. If you've been hurt before, your brain gets used to bracing for pain. It learns to internalize blame as a way to feel in control. If the hurt is your fault, then maybe you can prevent it from happening again, or you could have prevented it from happening before. It's a false sense of power that keeps you trapped in guilt and self-doubt. These patterns might make you feel in control, but they're actually spiraling your life down. They distort reality, turning neutral events into evidence that you're a problem. Your brain isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to protect you. But sometimes to heal, you have to challenge its survival playbook and choose actions that empower rather than imprison you. The cost of false narratives. These stories we tell ourselves don't just distort reality, they begin to shape it. When you attach a painful narrative to your identity, you're actually telling yourself, change is impossible. Where you could spend time on constructive thoughts by seeing the actuality of an event, you're ensuring you create an identity where these failures happen again and again. This is how false narratives create cycles of suffering. You start expecting failure, anticipating rejection, and bracing for disappointment. So much so that if anything good happens, you don't even notice it. You're only always paying attention to the stories you so believe. These stories begin to feel like truth, convincing you they're not subjective views of your life, but objective truths of the world. And you start holding on to them as your core beliefs. The cost? They rob you of confidence, peace, and hope. They rob you of your actual identity. But like any story, you can always erase it and rewrite it from scratch. The pain you feel isn't your destiny. It's a consequence of the meaning you've attached to neutral events. Change the meaning, and you change your life. Undoing the false narrative. Undoing a false narrative isn't about silencing your inner voice or pretending your pain doesn't exist. It's about calling those stories out for what they really are. Theories, not truths. Use precise language when you talk to yourself. The way you talk to yourself matters more than you think. There's a huge difference between I'm unlovable and I'm thinking that I'm unlovable. The first is a statement of fact written in stone, a self-imposed identity. The second? It's an observation of a passing thought. By labeling thoughts as thoughts, you create space between you and the story. That space is where healing begins. Next, challenge your brain's negativity bias. Remember, your mind is wired to focus on the worst-case scenarios. It's the survival instinct. But in today's world, this bias often works against you, turning small setbacks into overwhelming evidence of inadequacy. When your brain starts spiraling, remind yourself that it's normal to have these imaginations of the worst. It's an ingrained human trait. Your brain doesn't control you. It controls your body. At any moment, whenever you begin to fall into this negativity bias, you have the power of choice. Choose to let them go as passing thoughts, or choose to get dragged along in these worst-case nightmare scenarios. Start questioning your subjectivity by generating alternate explanations. If something bad happens, brainstorm at least 3 other potential reasons that have nothing to do with your personal worth. Got ghosted after a date? Maybe they weren't ready for a date. Maybe their priorities shifted. It doesn't mean you're unworthy. Notice how this shifts the focus away from self-blame and toward objective reasoning. Finally, practice reframing setbacks. Instead of seeing failure as proof of incompetence, see it as evidence of effort. Instead of interpreting rejection as a sign you're not enough, view it as a redirection towards understanding how you can improve. These shifts aren't about avoiding hard truths, they're about creating more balanced, compassionate ones. Your stories don't define you unless you let them. Every moment offers a choice: to believe the narrative that tears you down or to challenge it, rewrite it, and reclaim your power. The fact is, you're not broken, and you never were. The stories you've carried have shaped you, but they aren't who you are. Today, take one step to separate fact from fiction. Catch yourself in a spiraling thought and ask, is this true? Or is this just a story I'm telling myself? That question alone can open the door to a lighter, freer, more empowered life. Because the life you want isn't locked behind the pain of your past. It's waiting on the other side of the meaning you choose to give it. So rewrite your narrative, reclaim your truth, and never forget, the pen has always been in your hands.